Welcome to the first ever episode of the Unpacking BPD podcast, where we explore the depths of borderline personality disorder, one layer at a time. I'm your host, Sebastian Hayes, and I created this podcast for people living with borderline personality disorder who want to deeply understand their experiences, not just as a list of symptoms, but as a complex and layered part of who they are. This isn't the space for quick overviews or surface-level advice. Here, we'll dive deep into the lived experience of BPD, what it feels like, how it impacts your relationships and sense of self, and, most importantly, how to navigate it. If you're here, it might be because you're trying to make sense of a new diagnosis, or maybe you've lived with BPD for years but still struggle with the same patterns. Or maybe you're just exhausted from being misunderstood and want to feel seen. Wherever you are on this journey, I want you to know that you're not alone. And today, we're starting with the question at the heart of this podcast. What is borderline personality disorder really? Let's start with the basics. Clinicians describe BPD as a mental health condition characterized by 9 core symptoms, which include emotional instability, a fragile sense of self, impulsivity, and relationship challenges. But those words, clinical, detached, don't really tell you what it's like to live with BPD. So let's go deeper, breaking down each symptom and looking at what it might actually feel like in real life. Let's begin with one of the most universal symptoms, fear of abandonment. If you live with BPD, this fear can be overwhelming and ever-present, like a shadow that follows you in every relationship. It's not just about worrying that someone might leave. It's the gut-wrenching feeling that if they do, you might not survive it. Imagine making plans with a close friend, only to have them cancel at the last minute. For most people, this might be disappointing, but for someone with BPD, it can feel catastrophic. You might think, do they even care about me? Are they pulling away? Are they going to leave me for good? That fear can lead to behaviors you're not proud of. Texting them over and over, demanding answers, or even deciding to cut them off first, just to avoid the pain of being abandoned. Then there's unstable relationships. This symptom often feels like living on a seesaw. One day, you might idolize someone, seeing them as the perfect friend, partner, or confidant. But the next, a small disagreement or perceived slight can make you feel betrayed, even deeply hurt. Let's say your partner forgets to ask how your day was, and suddenly, it feels like they don't care about you at all. You might lash out, withdraw, or spiral into thoughts like, I can't trust anyone. These intense swings can leave you and the people you care about feeling exhausted, confused, and disconnected. Another hallmark of BPD is identity disturbance. This is often described as a shaky or fragmented sense of self. Have you ever thought, I don't even know who I am? Maybe you find yourself constantly shifting your goals, your style, or even the way you act, depending on who you're with. For example, you might feel confident and driven at work, only to feel aimless and lost when you're alone. It's not about being fake. It's about trying to anchor yourself when your identity feels like it's always in flux. Impulsive behaviors are another common experience. These aren't just occasional lapses in judgment. They're often driven by a need to escape emotional pain or fill a deep sense of emptiness. You might go on a spending spree, eat an entire pizza when you're not even hungry, or impulsively quit a job after a stressful day. For example, imagine you're feeling rejected by someone you care about. That pain might lead you to make a snap decision, like booking an expensive trip you can't afford just to distract yourself from the hurt. Speaking of emptiness, this is a symptom that's hard to describe unless you felt it. It's not just boredom or restlessness. It's a deep, hollow feeling, like something essential is missing inside you. You might try to fill that void with relationships, achievements, or even self-destructive behaviors, but nothing seems to last. I once heard someone with BPD describe it as feeling like a ghost, present in the world but disconnected from it, as if they don't fully exist. Then there's anger, which is often misunderstood. People with BPD might get labeled as angry or explosive, but that anger usually comes from a place of deep hurt or fear. Imagine a friend brushes off something you were excited to share. For most people, this might be frustrating, but for you, it might feel like a profound rejection, triggering an outburst you regret later. You might slam doors, yell, or even shut down entirely. It's not about being out of control. It's about feeling emotions so intensely that they sometimes spill out in ways you don't want. Paranoia and dissociation are other symptoms that can feel isolating. During times of stress, you might find yourself questioning whether the people in your life are truly loyal or whether they're secretly talking about you. Dissociation, on the other hand, can feel like zoning out or watching yourself from the outside, as if you're not fully present in your own life. Imagine being in a heated argument and suddenly feeling like you're floating above it, detached and disconnected. These experiences can make it hard to trust yourself or the people around you. One of the most serious symptoms of BPD is recurrent suicidal behavior or self-harm. These aren't cries for attention. They're ways to cope with overwhelming emotions or to feel something when you're otherwise numb. For example, you might find yourself thinking, "I can't handle this anymore," after a fight with a loved one, and turning to self-harm as a way to release the pain. These moments can be terrifying and isolating, but they're also deeply misunderstood by those who haven't experienced them. And finally, emotional instability ties all of these experiences together. Imagine waking up feeling okay only to have one small interaction, a missed text, a critical comment, send you into a spiral of sadness, anger, or panic. For someone with BPD, emotions don't just come and go. They hit like waves, often leaving you feeling like you're drowning with no way back to shore. These 9 symptoms might sound overwhelming, but it's important to remember that they don't come from nowhere. For many people, BPD is rooted in early experiences, especially in relationships. Maybe you grew up in an environment where love felt conditional, where you had to earn affection or walk on eggshells to avoid conflict. Over time, those experiences shape how your brain processes emotions, relationships, and even your sense of self. But here's the thing. BPD isn't a life sentence. Yes, it's challenging, and yes, it takes work, but it's also something you can learn to manage. People with BPD can and do go on to build stable relationships, develop a strong sense of self, and create lives that feel meaningful and fulfilling. Understanding BPD isn't just about putting a name to your struggles. It's about finding a roadmap for healing. It's about learning to be kinder to yourself, to understand the patterns that show up in your life, and to take steps toward change. For me, understanding BPD is like turning on a light in a dark room. The struggles don't disappear, but you can start to see them clearly, and that clarity can make all the difference. You are not defined by your struggles. BPD is a part of your story, but it's not the whole story. You're not broken. You're someone who's been hurt, but you're also someone who can heal. Thank you for joining me for this first episode of the Unpacking BPD podcast. In our next episode, we'll dive deep into the fear of abandonment, what it looks like, why it happens, and how to manage it. Until then, take care of yourself and remember, you're not alone in this journey. I'm your host, Sebastian Hayes, and I'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.